So yesterday I talked about British Columbia Premier David Eby's gambit to try and get BC Green voters to cast a vote for the BC NDP to try and block the Conservatives from winning a majority, which already was kind of a tell that he knows that he's probably going to lose the election unless that happens. And what I had predicted was that a lot of people are going to see this as deeply pathetic. A man who doesn't really deserve to be in office himself just was appointed to be the premier, begging that other people show up and save him. And I was basically proven to be right that a lot of Green voters almost reactionarily said, I'm just going to vote Green even harder because you had the audacity to just ask me to save you. Not because you've done a good job, but just because I should hate the other guys, which is a terrible pitch to make. This was the post that he had put up that I had read the other day. This election is unlike any we've seen before. For Green voters, John Rustad is a risk that we can't afford or can't ignore. He supports conspiracy theories and hateful candidates, yada, yada, yada. And it's so condescending talking to the Green voters that we can't ignore the risk that he's taking. Like, I'm not a Green voter. I'm obviously very pro-conservative. But you don't start saying we when you're not with them. They don't vote BC NDP for a reason. This is also why every time people freak out and think that the Liberals and the NDP federally could get together to try and block Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives and continue on with the terrible coalition government that we currently have, despite people not liking them, it's not going to happen because the federal NDP and the federal Liberals are different parties for a reason. In fact, I think if the Greens just disappeared, more of the voters would probably end up voting Conservative than they would end up voting NDP, because we are in an atmosphere of a change election. People want change, and they are voting for whoever the incumbent is not. Even if they are not voting for the Conservative, they don't want the incumbent. So almost no matter what happens, I think people are going to force the Conservatives into government. That the Conservatives could just say, we're not campaigning anymore, we're all going to go to sleep, go on vacation. And I think the voters of BC are just going to push them through regardless. And, there is still a chance that the BC NDP could win, a substantial chance. I just think that it's mostly leaning towards the Conservatives winning this election. 75% chance from my own back of the napkin math on what I think might happen here. Regardless, though, now I want to show you the numbers of what has resulted from David Eby just begging Green voters vote for us and not the other guys. And it has resulted in the NDP losing votes and the Greens gaining. This is a poll that includes undecided and decided voters who are likely to vote. So these 3% of undecided voters are likely to at least vote in this election. They just don't know who to vote for yet. And the BC NDP are still floundering at 38%. In fact, yesterday's poll showed them at 39%, and they've dropped back one, and the Greens have gone up one from 10 to 11, or it might have actually been like 9.5 to 11, and the Conservatives are still riding high at 42%. I believe if I go down to only the decided votes, it's actually an even larger lead for the Conservatives. So let's go up to the decided voters only. It's 44% for the BC Conservatives, 39% for the NDP, and 12% for the Green Party, with 5% saying that they will vote for another party, which includes some of the independent people who used to be United MLAs running for re-election. Most of them aren't even trying. Most of them are only running because if you lose as an independent, you get a transition allowance over the next 18 months, rather than just saying, I'm not running in this election again. You actually get a big payout. That's what motivates a lot of these people in my mind, because a lot of them are in ridings where there's not even a chance that they're going to get more than 5% of the vote, and they're not even going to be able to trip up one of the other parties. It's a riding that's going blue, and they're just there so that they lose and then get another couple $1,000s every month for the next 18 months. But this has been just an unmitigated disaster for Eby. You never show weakness in an election. You never admit you've done anything wrong. You don't do anything like that unless it's just one of those situations where, you accidentally, rolled a red stop sign, everyone saw you do it, and you're like, I apologize. That's kind of one of those moments where you actually admit to doing something wrong. But in election time, every time you admit to doing something wrong, the media makes it seem like you're admitting to being a liar, a cheat, and a fraud. So for the most part, politicians tend to say nothing. Although we want our politicians to be more honest, the problem is our media is so dishonest that by being honest, they will pretend that you are a horrible, terrible person and you admit it. Regardless, though, Eby looked like he's going to lose, and really that is what it looks like is going to happen here. I just want to show you the crosstabs right now for the 2020 vote, including some of the undecideds. It's terrible for David Eby right now. Only 63% in this IVR poll, 448 people polled, who voted BC NDP in 2020 say they're voting BC NDP in this election. Only 16% of Liberal voters from last election are voting BC NDP. The Conservatives are winning Liberal voters better than the NDP are winning their own 2020 base. And the Conservatives are winning more NDP voters from 2020 than the NDP are winning Liberal voters from 2020. It's so bad for David Eby right now. It's just one of those elections where, simply put, people want change. And there's not enough strength to push the NDP back in with the type of voter numbers that we've seen coming out. First day of advanced voting, it smashed the previous record. The previous record was something like 123,000 people voted in the advanced polls in the previous record holding year. This year, we have 171,000 people voting in the first day of advanced polls. And the BC Conservatives do not have a monster of a campaign machine the way that the BC NDP or BC Liberals usually would. That's organic. That's organically people showing up because they just don't like the current government. I even can show you the likely voter numbers in these polls, showing that the people saying that they're likely to vote but not certain to vote are mostly NDP, and those saying that they're certain to vote or already have voted are heavily leaning towards the Conservatives. And now I'm just going to stop here, and this might turn a little bit boring. My apologies in advance. But I'm going to show you why the other polls showing 5% plus NDP, 4% NDP, and they're showing the NDP ahead, they're very likely off. Main Street Research is actually probably doing the best job of all the pollsters. And I'm not just saying that because they're showing the Conservatives ahead. IVR polls in general have been shown to be better because they reach a more diverse group of people. And where diversity actually matters is in things like polling, because you need to poll a lot of different types of people to see where different ridings are at. And the NDP or the NDP pro polls, the polls showing the NDP ahead, and some of these polls are run by the Conservatives like Angus Reid. The problem is that they're not rebalancing their numbers properly. So in Main Street polls, what you'll often see is 50% of the people who responded have university bachelor degrees or higher, so graduate degrees as well. Only about 35% of people in British Columbia have bachelor degrees from universities. The most people either have high school or less, or they have trades degrees or college degrees. Those two groups lean heavily conservative. Not many sociologist type people in those groups. And so university educated people lean a little bit more NDP, but they're a minority. But when it comes to polling, they're more likely to pick up the phone and answer a poll. They might be a little bit more likely to vote, but they're not going to be 50% of the electorate. So Main Street Research tends to weight their sample down a little bit because it's just not the type of people who are going to show up and vote on election day. Just because you're more likely to take a poll doesn't mean you're more likely to actually vote. If that was true, apparently South Asians aren't voting at all, and the election is going to be 95% white people. It's just white people tend to take polls, and other groups maybe are smarter than us all, and they don't take polls because it's annoying. Regardless, though, the other thing that Main Street has shown is that they do riding-specific polls where they poll 250 people, 220 people in one specific riding, which is actually a really good sample when we're just talking about a riding of like 40,000 people or 40,000 eligible voters. And what their individual riding polling is showing is that places like Kelowna, Vernon Limby, or going Lumbee, I guess, they're very conservative. All the other polls are showing the north and interior regions as a neck-and-neck race between the Conservatives and NDP. That's not reality. That's not reality at all. And not only is that not reality, this is the same mistake so many pollsters had made back in Alberta's 2023 provincial election. They showed the NDP up and that the NDP was really tight with the UCP when it came to rural areas. It's not true. It's not true. The UCP blew it out in the rural ridings. And now in BC, we're seeing that, the NDP is doing pretty well in the north and interior. They could end up winning some of these Kelowna ridings. They're not going to win a Kelowna riding. The the Main Street Research just released 2 Kelowna riding polls. The Conservatives are at like 47% in these polls. In the weakest of the Kelowna ridings, they were at 47%. Based on other polling projections, the Conservatives should have lost one of the Kelowna ridings. It's just not happening. It's just not an NDP part of the province anymore. And so when we do more specific polling and we try harder to reach more people who are electricians, plumbers, farmers, small business owners, the ridings are much more conservative than you think. Online polling panels tend to have a lot more public sector employees in them, younger people, and it waters down what the sample that you're getting. A lot more university arts students in those areas, in those online polls, that are making everything look more NDP. But I still urge you, make sure you go out and vote. Make sure all your neighbors went out and voted. It's not like a time to be nervous. Should I ask them if they voted or not? Guys, it could save the province to get your one neighbor to finally go and vote for the first time in 3 decades. So make sure you do that. But we can feel pretty heartened in that all of the more accurate indicators are showing that this could be a conservative walkover. So make sure you get out and vote, do all that fine stuff. But to get back to it, I think really, and this is my theory on elections, you can't short circuit public opinion. Most of the campaigning that people do, the debates, the door knocking, the leafleting, all this, it's very important, but it's also really can't change people's opinions. Money can't buy votes in a very real way. Michael Bloomberg proved this. Tom Steyer proved this in the 2020 Democratic primaries. They spent massive amounts of money, spent way more than Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders. Nobody voted for them because they didn't want them. And I think in British Columbia right now, although you can find some of the more hyper-partisan people on the polls saying they're still voting NDP, does the mood really feel like NDP people are running out of the house to cast a vote for David Eby? Not really. There's a heavy apathy when it comes to the NDP side of things. The NDP wouldn't be pulling stuff like begging Green voters to vote for them, more like what you see in these car parks where like dozens and dozens of Green and Conservative signs have been all torn up and torched by people. You don't do that if you're winning. I know it's just probably a crazy crank who's NDP doing that. It's not like the party's organizing that vandalism. No one would be caught dead in a party actually organizing vandalism. It's just a bad look. But that stuff wouldn't be happening if there wasn't the internal polling desperation inside the NDP. It's going to be a slug match on election day, but I think that when we all see it shake out, there's just going to be the kind of silent middle-class voter who doesn't answer the polls. They're not very political, but they're going to come out and say, I just need the taxes lowered. I just need someone to crack down on crime. I need the drug policies cut. Things like we need, actual letter grades back in schools. That sounds fantastic to most people because it's so pathetic that we've become a province where the only thing you look forward to is what the government's going to announce in terms of new programs. Programs cannot build an economy. And this is also why the Green Party fails so hard and the NDP fails so hard on the federal level. At the end of the day, people understand that the economy actually needs to work itself. It can't have basically commissars sitting behind desks down in whatever capital of your province or country organizing where the growth is going to come from. The growth happens where it happens, and the government's pretty much along for the ride. And the NDP has decided that actually it's in charge of the economy. It's not. And that's why everything keeps falling apart more. The NDP try and fix everything back up because it's the government that's the problem after a while. The economy knows what to do. The government just has to let the economy do what it's going to do. Anyways, that's it for me today, guys. If you want to support the show, I have in the description below the Give, Send, Go link for our legal fund. That's also pinned in the comments below. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, do all that stuff. Recommend the show to others. I've talked to a lot of people just on the streets as I walk around who watch the show. It's great to see you guys, comfortable and walking up to me and then, knowing that there's a big risk that if you start talking to me about politics in real life, I'm going to ramble on about politics for 10 minutes and make you late for whatever you're going to. But, still great to see people liking the show. And I hope that, you all keep watching. Daniel Boardman just released a video for the channel as well. You're probably going to see Daniel pop up more often these days. He's gotten a lot of big victories that actually benefit your guys' lives that you don't know about, like helping get the IRGC and Samadou listed as terrorist organizations in Canada. That's going to clean up a lot of terrorist money laundering in this country. It's one of those minor things you don't realize how much certain individuals do on those issues, but Daniel and some of his friends have been very key in trying to root out terrorism in our country. Anyways, that's it for me today, guys. Have a good one.